Factoring out a negative 1. Sometimes the term in the numerator and the terms in the denominator are not written in the same order. For example, 5 minus x over x minus 5. Notice that the factor in the numerator and the denominator are not exactly the same, but are really similar. They only differ by a negative. In this case, we factor out a negative 1. So in the numerator, I have 5 minus x. I would prefer to rewrite that as negative x plus 5. I know I'm allowed to rearrange the order of a polynomial as long as I keep the signs on the correct term. So the negative's in front of the x, so the negative still needs to be in front of the x when I rearrange it. In the denominator, I'm going to keep it x minus 5. Okay, so now I can factor a negative 1 out of the numerator. Then it's left with x minus 5 over x minus 5. The x minus 5 and x minus 5, now that it's factored, can divide out because there is a multiply sign between the negative 1 and the x minus 5 in the numerator. And then I divide that out, and my answer is negative 1. So notice that if they only differ by a negative, 5 minus x over x minus 5, the x is negative in the numerator, but positive in the denominator. The x is positive in the numerator, yet negative in the denominator, then the answer is just going to divide out to negative 1. Please note that that is not the case for the next two examples. On 5 plus x over x plus 5, if I rearrange it, so it's x plus 5 over x plus 5, I just change the order in the numerator. These divide out to 1, and it's not equal to negative 1. So just because the order is backwards doesn't mean it's going to turn into a negative 1. It's only if the signs are off by a negative. Now let's take a look at this next example. 5 plus x over x minus 5. Notice the x is positive in the numerator and the x is positive in the denominator. So that means that the x's are the same sign. But the 5 is positive in the numerator, but it's negative in the denominator. So the x's have the same sign, but the 5's have different signs. So if I rearrange this, please note that there is nothing else I can do here. This doesn't work at all. This is as reduced as you're going to get it. Some students might say, oh wait, but what if you factor a negative out of the denominator? Even if I do that, I don't get anything that divides out. It doesn't reduce. So I think the best rule of thumb is if it's ever out of order, rearrange it, factor a negative 1 out if you can, and then proceed. Here are some examples of that. So we have 2 minus x over x cubed minus 8. Notice that the 2 is in the front and the x is in the back, whereas the x is in the front and the denominator and the numbers in the back. That's not in the same order, so I'm going to rearrange the numerator to be negative x plus 2. In the numerator, I can factor out a negative 1, so that gets me x minus 2. In the denominator, I have a difference of cubes. So that's x cubed minus 2 cubed. In the trinomial, I'm getting x squared, 2x, and 2 times 2 is 4. Same, opposite, always positive. I'm going to erase this here. Is there anything in the numerator and anything in the denominator that looks exactly the same that I can divide out now that I have factored and made these products? So the opposite of multiply is divide, and x minus 2 divides out. I'm left with negative 1 in the numerator and x squared plus 2x plus 4 in the denominator. You can use parentheses on the denominator or not. Either way is fine by me. In fact, the bar is a grouping symbol, which means that anything that is covering the bar is covering is automatically grouped, so that's why you don't need it. On the next problem, we have a lot of things out of order in the denominator. We prefer our x squareds in the front, and then our x's, and then our numbers. My exponents want to go in decreasing order. So if I put the denominator in more standard form, that gets me negative x squared in the front, minus 5x, plus 14. Now the first thing I want to do when I factor is factor out a GCF. There is no GCF in the numerator, so I'll come back and factor that in a minute. But in the denominator, there is a GCF. And some students might argue, wait, there's no GCF. But remember I told you if there's ever a negative in front of the first term, we factor that out. So I factor the negative 1 out to get x squared plus 5x minus 14. The numerator is a trinomial with no with leading coefficient of 1. So I need two numbers that multiply to negative 6, yet add to that invisible 1. I think the numbers are 3 and 2, with a positive on the 3 and a negative on the 2. And then I have to factor the denominator a little more after I factor the GCF out. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 14 and add to 5. I think that's a 7 and a 2. It has to have two different signs, so I have a plus on the 7 and a minus on the 2. So that will add to positive 5. Now that I've had it in factored form, I know that these are products, and so I can divide out any common factors. So my solution is x plus 3 over negative 1, x plus 7. Now, normally we don't like having the negative 1 in the denominator. We prefer to have it out in front or in the numerator, so if you want to, you can move that to the numerator or out in front. I prefer it out in front. But honestly, I'm going to accept either way. On the next example, we have a 10 minus x in the denominator that is in the wrong order. So we need to reorder that to make it negative x plus 10 in the denominator. In the numerator, it's already in standard form 2x minus 20, so that should work. When I factor, I'm factoring out a GCF of 2. In the denominator, I'm factoring out a GCF of negative 1. Once I do that, I can see that the x minus 10 is a common factor in the numerator and the denominator. So when I divide them out, I'm getting 2 over negative 1, which is equal to negative 2. So that whole polynomial divided out to just negative 2. And the last one of this section, the denominator is out of order. 64 minus x squared is not in the right order. So I'm going to rearrange that to be negative x squared plus 64. So then I factor the numerator and factor the denominator. It looks like I need to factor out a negative 1 out of the denominator. The numerator is a trinomial with a leading coefficient of 1, so I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 16 yet add to negative 6. So that's 8 and 2, with a negative on the 8 and a positive on the 2, so that gets me a negative 6. And then I need to factor again in the denominator. Looks like the denominator is a difference of 2 squares. Once I have the numerator and the denominator factored, I can just divide out any common factors, and I'm left with x plus 2 over x plus 8. The negative could go in the bottom, but I'm going to go ahead and put it out in front because I feel like that's a little bit more clear, but you could probably leave it in the bottom.